Megan worked in the big house at the edge of town. She dusted the grand stairs, polished shiny floors, and served meals on silver trays. She had been a maid for as long as she could remember. Megan never imagined that her life could be anything different. One cold, quiet night, as the stars shone brightly over the vast mansion, the wealthy owner of the house, Mr. Henry Carter, stood outside. He was a man who always wore suits and never smiled much. He looked at Megan, holding out a small box. Inside was a sparkling ring. Without a word, he bent his head slightly, a strange action for someone like him, asking her to marry him. Megan's hands shook as she held the box. The news of the midnight proposal spread through the mansion faster than the wind. By morning, even the gardeners and cooks whispered about it. Megan didn't know what to think. She was just a maid. Why would Mr. Carter, one of the richest men in the city, choose her? She spent the whole night thinking about what this would mean for her life. The next morning, Megan nervously attended her first business meeting with Mr. Carter. The room was filled with important people wearing serious expressions. Megan felt like she didn't belong. The meeting began, and everyone started discussing numbers and plans. Suddenly, an old woman with sharp eyes and a voice like thunder pointed at Megan. "Who is she?" the woman asked. The room fell silent. Before Mr. Carter could answer, another person spoke up, a younger man with a sly grin. "Is she the new investor or something else?" he said with a chuckle. Megan turned red, clutching the edge of her chair. But then, something unexpected happened. A folder was passed around the table, and when Megan looked at it, her heart stopped. It had her name on it. Confused, she opened it and stared at the papers inside. Every word felt heavier than the last. Megan couldn't believe what she was reading. Just as the room erupted into murmurs, Megan's fingers tightened around the folder. Something big was happening, something she didn't fully understand yet. Megan's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages in the folder. Every word seemed to pull her deeper into a mystery she hadn't been prepared for. The papers detailed a series of business transactions, huge sums of money, land deeds, and contracts signed with unfamiliar names. But there, buried among them, was her own name, listed as a beneficiary to an enormous trust fund. Her chest tightened as questions swirled in her mind. How could her name be on something so important, so valuable? She had always believed she was just a maid, an unseen, insignificant part of the grand household. The murmurs in the boardroom grew louder, and Megan could feel their stares drilling into her. She wished she could disappear into the shadows of the grand mansion once again. Suddenly, the sharp-eyed old woman who had first questioned Megan stood up. "This is outrageous," she declared, her voice shaking the room. "What is this nonsense, Henry? Who is she, really?" Mr. Carter's face remained calm, though his eyes flickered with an emotion Megan couldn't place. He folded his hands on the table and said nothing. The silence from him only fueled the tension in the room. The sly young man leaned forward with an amused expression. "You mean to tell us," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "that she isn't just the maid? Is there something else we should know, Mr. Carter?" Megan couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed the folder away and rose from her seat. Her legs felt like jelly, but she willed herself to stay standing. The room seemed to spin as she tried to process everything. Why her? Why now? And why in front of all these people? Before she could utter a word, a tall man in a corner, dressed in a black suit, stepped forward. He placed another folder on the table, this one bearing the Carter family crest. Without looking at Megan, he said, It's time they knew the truth. The room erupted in gasps and whispers, but Megan barely heard them. Her eyes were fixed on the folder with the crest. It seemed to hold the answers to the questions that had haunted her for years. Questions about her past, about her place in the world. And yet she hesitated. Part of her didn't want to know what was inside. Something told her that opening that folder would change her life forever. Megan's eyes darted between the folder bearing the Carter family crest and the sea of faces surrounding her. She could feel her heart pounding, loud and fast like a drum. The weight of everyone's expectations, curiosity, and silent judgment pressed down on her. But that folder, it felt as though it carried an invisible force, pulling her toward it, daring her to uncover its secrets. Slowly, Megan reached out and lifted the folder. The room fell silent. Even the shuffling of papers stopped. As she opened it, the first page stared back at her with bold letters. Estate beneficiaries and ancestral ties. Her fingers trembled as she turned to the next page. There, her name was listed once again, but this time it was followed by two words that froze her in place. Legal heir. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Megan's mind raced as she read the words over and over again. Her? An heir? To what? And why? The questions swirled in her mind, loud and relentless. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room glued to her, some filled with shock, others with suspicion. The sharp-eyed old woman broke the silence. This cannot be true, she hissed. An heir to the Carter legacy? From where? This must be some kind of mistake. Megan didn't have the answers. She couldn't even process what was in front of her. Mr. Carter finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. There are no mistakes, he said, his eyes locking onto the old woman's. The documents are clear. The old woman's face twisted with disbelief. But how? Who is she to you, Henry? Megan wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but her throat felt dry, her voice lost. Instead, she clutched the folder tightly, as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded in this whirlwind of revelations. The younger man with the sly grin leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the table. Well, this just got interesting, he said, his tone half amused, half intrigued. If she's an heir, then she must have some connection to the family we don't know about. Care to enlighten us, Mr. Carter? Before Mr. Carter could respond, the tall man in the black suit stepped forward again. He placed yet another document on the table, this one sealed with wax. This should explain everything, he said, his deep voice steady and emotionless. The room collectively held its breath as Mr. Carter broke the seal and unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the document, and for the first time that day, his expression softened. He looked up at Megan, his gaze filled with something that resembled both sorrow and relief. You deserve to know the truth, Megan, he said, his voice quieter now. It's time. Megan's heart sank as she realized the answers she had longed for were about to unravel before her. But a part of her wondered if she was truly ready to hear them. Megan's breath caught in her chest as Mr. Carter slowly handed the sealed document to her. The paper felt heavy in her hands, as though it carried the weight of an entire lifetime she had never known. The room was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on Megan as she began to read. The document revealed a story Megan couldn't have dreamed of. It spoke of a secret arrangement, one made many years ago between Mr. Carter and her late mother. Her mother, once a caretaker in the same mansion, had been entrusted with something precious, a claim to the Carter estate. Megan had been named the rightful heir, hidden away under layers of secrecy for reasons still unclear. The words blurred in Megan's vision as she read about her mother's sacrifices and the promises made. Her mother had chosen to live a quiet, humble life rather than disrupt the powerful Carter family, but she had ensured Megan's place in the legacy would be protected. A loud thud pulled Megan out of her thoughts. The sharp-eyed old woman had slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd! A maid's daughter inheriting the Carter fortune? It's a scandal," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger. The younger man, now leaning forward with an almost predatory interest, smirked. "Well, Henry, I must admit, you do know how to keep things interesting," he said. "But if she's the heir, what's her role here? Surely she's not just going to sweep floors anymore." Megan felt the weight of the room pressing down on her. The revelation was too much to process. She wanted to run, to escape this strange, unfamiliar world where her identity was being rewritten. But something deep inside her, a small flicker of courage, kept her rooted to the spot. Kept her rooted to the spot. Mr. Carter stood up, his towering presence commanding attention. "Megan is not just the heir," he said firmly, his voice carrying a tone of finality. "She has a seat at this table. It's time everyone accepts that." Gasps rippled through the room, and Megan's heart pounded louder. A seat at the table? She had barely understood the words on the page, let alone what they meant for her future. Her hands clenched tightly as she fought the urge to back away from it all. But the faces around the table were a mix of disbelief, envy, and intrigue, as though waiting to see what Megan would do next. And so, she stood there, trapped between the person she thought she was and the person she was apparently destined to become, unsure of what her next move should be. Megan stood motionless, her hands tightening around the folder as Mr. Carter's words echoed in her mind. A seat at this table. The reality of what was happening seemed unreal, as if she were caught in a dream she couldn't wake from. She looked around the room, feeling the weight of countless eyes watching her every move, some scrutinizing, others filled with disbelief, and a few glimmering with hidden motives. The sharp-eyed old woman rose to her feet, her face set in a hard, cold expression. "This is preposterous, Henry," she said. "This girl cannot possibly understand the complexities of this business. She would only jeopardize everything we've built." The statement stung, but Megan forced herself to remain still. Inside, she felt like a storm was raging, but outwardly, she held her composure. Mr. Carter, however, responded without hesitation. "That is not your decision to make," he said firmly. "Megan has a rightful place here. Whether you approve or not is irrelevant." The woman's lips thinned into a tight line as she sank back into her chair, her eyes never leaving Megan. Across the table, the sly young man smirked, as if enjoying the unfolding drama. He leaned forward again, resting his chin on his hand. "If she's going to take her place at the table, perhaps she should prove herself," he said, his tone laced with amusement. "Don't you think, Mr. Carter?" Megan's heart sank further. Prove herself? She didn't even understand the full extent of what was happening yet, let alone know how to prove anything. The thought of stepping into this unfamiliar world of power and strategy terrified her, and yet deep down, a small part of her, the part that had always dreamed of something bigger, began to stir. Before Megan could find her voice, Mr. Carter nodded. "Perhaps you're right," he said, his gaze shifting to Megan. "She will have to prove herself, but not for you or anyone else in this room. She will do it for herself and for what she believes in. The room buzzed with whispers, but Megan hardly heard them. Her mind was spinning with uncertainty and fear, but also a strange, growing determination. This was her chance, her opportunity to step out of the shadows and into the light. But the path ahead was shrouded in mystery, and Megan had no idea what awaited her. Megan stood in the center of the boardroom, her mind racing as she absorbed Mr. Carter's words. The weight of her new reality felt overwhelming, yet there was a flicker of determination deep within her. She couldn't back down now, not with so many eyes watching her, expecting her to fail. Mr. Carter gestured for her to sit back down, but Megan remained standing, her grip tightening on the folder. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. She needed to know what proving herself would mean. What was expected of her? And what did her role as an heir truly entail? The old woman narrowed her eyes, her sharp gaze cutting through Megan's resolve. If she is to be an heir, the woman said in a cold, measured tone, then let her handle the negotiations with our next client. Let's see if she can manage even the basics. Megan's stomach dropped at the suggestion. Negotiations? She had never been part of anything remotely like that. Her life had been spent cleaning rooms and serving meals, not making deals with powerful clients. But before she could respond, Mr. Carter spoke again. She will handle it, he said firmly, his voice carrying an air of authority. And I have full confidence that she will rise to the occasion. Megan glanced at him, searching for any sign of hesitation in his face. But Mr. Carter's expression remained steady, as if he believed in her more than she believed in herself. Her thoughts swirled as the realization sank in. This was her test, her chance to prove she belonged in this unfamiliar, elite world. The younger man leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening. Well then, he said with a chuckle, this should be entertaining. I'd say we give her a week to prepare. After all, we wouldn't want the heir to be completely unprepared, would we? Megan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his mockery. A week? That wasn't much time at all. But as much as fear gripped her, she knew she had to try. This was her chance to prove that she was more than just a maid, more than the girl everyone underestimated. With a shaky but determined voice, Megan finally spoke. I'll do it, she said, her words surprising even herself. I'll prepare, and I'll handle the negotiations. The room erupted into whispers, but Megan didn't let them faze her. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges she wasn't prepared for. But deep down, she felt the spark of something new, an opportunity to change her life forever. Megan spent every moment of the next week preparing for the negotiations. By day, she read through mountains of documents, learning everything she could about the client and the business. By night, she practiced speaking confidently, pushing past the doubts and insecurities that still lingered. Each passing day made her feel a little stronger, a little more ready to face the challenge ahead. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. The boardroom felt even larger and more intimidating than before. Megan sat at the table, her hands gripping a neatly organized folder of notes. Across from her sat the client, a stern-looking man with sharp eyes. The room was silent as Megan began her presentation. Though her voice trembled at first, she quickly found a rhythm. She explained the proposal clearly, addressing every detail with confidence. Questions from the client were met with thoughtful, well-prepared answers. Megan felt the weight of the board's stares, but she pushed through, determined to prove she deserved her place at the table. When the meeting ended, The client gave a small nod. "You've done well," he said simply before leaving the room. The board members sat in stunned silence, their disbelief slowly giving way to reluctant admiration. Even the sharp-eyed old woman couldn't find a word of criticism. Mr. Carter broke the silence. "Well done, Megan," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've proven that you belong here." For the first time, Megan allowed herself to smile. She had faced her fears and emerged stronger. Though the journey ahead would still be filled with challenges, Megan knew she was no longer just a maid. She was now part of a world she had only dreamed of, a world where she could shape her own destiny. And so, her story continued, a new chapter filled with endless possibilities waiting to be written.